Anyway, welcome. Let's set the stage. Just yesterday, we wrote an article about the Russian Marxist and anti-war activist Boris Kagarlitsky. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was released in December, which, you know, gave some people some optimism, like maybe we can, influence Putin a bit with our campaigns, blah blah blah. Now that hope is completely crushed again. All right. So. And in a month, there is an election, and I spoke to Gedin, who is a political scientist, and he said that this might even be a death sentence for him. He's quite old. And he interpreted it as a sign of two things: that there is no room for dissent, and that Putin is preparing for a long war. And the American Senate, they have just passed an aid package together with support for Israel. We're going to come into all of these geopolitical aspects later on, and maybe it will get through then the House of Representatives if the Republicans don't stop it. There have been some Russian attacks lately in the Sinskar region in the northeast of Ukraine, and just today Ukraine, at least they have said so, they claim so, that they have sunk a Russian warship in the Black Sea. So the war is basically just slowly moving on, and here in the west from outside there is also the sense that it's going to be a long war. And maybe you can correct me on these points, Hanna, later on. So let's start with you, Hanna Perekhoda. Please correct me if my introduction and add information, and tell us all, where are we now? And like, how would you describe the situation in the Ukraine right now?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, for giving this opportunity to actually present my perspective and also the perspective of my organization. On the more general level, so yes, it's been 2 years that Russia is waging its aggression against Ukraine, and the media says that in the Western societies and among the Western politicians we have a Ukraine war fatigue. But also when Ukrainians hear it, we don't know, like we understand, but we don't know whether to laugh or to cry, because people who are the most tired of this war are Ukrainians themselves, especially those who live in the territories under occupation or under attack of the Russian missiles. So the statistics are quite scary, because 8 of 10 Ukrainian citizens say that they have already lost a member of their family or a close friend in this war. So that means this war, it's really concerns every citizen of Ukraine. So in general, the cost of this war that are being paid by the Ukrainian citizens is actually growing every day, independently of the fact if it's on your news list or not. Of course, the feeling of being tired is growing in the Ukrainian society, but so does a desire to actually reaffirm the choice that most of the Ukrainians have made in the beginning of the invasion, a choice to actually defend their families, to organize into a massive and popular resistance, but also in doing so to defend a project of a society which is opposed to a Russian one. That means a society where there is a necessary framework for a political and social life, and a society where in general the change is possible, because the project which is proposed by Putin was proposed at the beginning of the war, before the war, and even now, and he's quite clear about that. He wants a world where no social struggle, no struggle for emancipation could ever succeed. So his vision of the world is a world of a radical social peace, a social peace achieved through the oppression, and he already imposed this vision on other countries. Belarus, Kazakhstan, Syria, where Putin actually with the arms and Russian weapons and Russian mercenaries imposed the regimes where no social or political liberties ever exist. So this is the general framework. It was so it didn't actually change. But of course, the situation is evolving in a sense that in Ukraine, the internal contradictions, class contradiction, the political struggle, the growing inequality, and also the remaining corruption didn't disappear anywhere. But the Ukrainian society actually is trying to manage the situation, to be united also with the government, having a common objective, the defense of a society where a change is possible, where freedom exists, but at the same time having a possibility to actually, in the very hard conditions of war, to continue to defend these democratic and social rights inside the country.
All right. And what do you think that other countries can do to help? And also like leftist movements in other countries, what do you think that they should do in order to get the help that you think that Ukraine needs?
Yeah, there is also a lot of things to say. And one of the very frustrating elements of this whole discussion in the Western media is actually, I have an impression that people are pretending that they're actually pushing Ukrainian societies, saying that let's have a compromise, you know, the war is long, you are losing a lot of people, you are suffering, so just make a compromise with Putin and it will arrange the situation. I can explain later why this is a very weird logic. But also by saying that, there is a presupposition that the societies that are supposed to be on the Ukrainian side have already done everything that they were expected to do. They have already done enough to actually introduce the sanctions and to apply the sanctions, to make them actually work. So they pretend that they have already sent all the weapons necessary, and actually it's not the case. So you cannot push Ukrainian societies towards a painful compromise without actually fulfilling your promises that were given. And one of these promises is actually effective sanctions in order to make the Russian military machine stop, because it's still running. Hope not. So the Russian military machine is still running and still producing a lot of weapons, and it is possible because they have money. And this money is the result of the trade. That is continuing with Russia, and they also have a possibility to have some necessary elements that they cannot produce inside the country and to buy it in other countries. So this is something which we can really help from being here in the Western countries and in other countries, not just Western, by actually fulfilling in doing things we promised to do. So this is at least the first step, and then maybe we can continue more about details, but this is my general impression.
Yeah, I would like to hear more about it. I would like you to later on explain also why this pressure to negotiate, why you mentioned that as something that bothers you somehow. So I would like to hear about that. But first, let's hear from Hanna Gedin from the Swedish Left Party. First of all, what's your comment? Do you want to say something about what Hanna has said? And after that, I would like you to develop on how you, as a party, have worked in the manner that she said, working to help the Ukrainian struggle nationally in Sweden.
Yes, I will try to do that. Thank you so much for having this meeting. I would like to start with that because I think this is a very good opportunity for the left from different places to come together and to discuss and to learn more. And actually I'm working at the moment for the Swedish and the Danish Left Party in the European Union, and we are organizing this Friday a big event for the European left parties. I know that Socialny Ruch is coming as well, so that as well is, I mean, those kind of opportunities are really, really important in this depressing world, I think. I would like to comment as well on what you said, Hanna. I do completely agree on that the countries has not done enough. If you look at, for example, this discussion about whether people should be satisfied now or not, from the Swedish Left Party's perspective, we say that no, the Russian troops, they must withdraw from Ukraine territory. Then we can discuss. Because this is an invasion, a brutal invasion on another country. And what it does, actually, with international law, if we are saying this is acceptable, now let's have a discussion, is that we open up for, international law, humanitarian law, it doesn't mean anything anymore. We can see the same tendencies in Palestine and Israel. So that is, I fear for that. I have a lawyer's degree. I am quite concerned about international law in general. And of course, on the that we should keep supporting with aid package to Ukraine. As long as the Ukrainian people wants it, we should go on sending aid, I think. And as well on the sanctions, I see from a European Union perspective, they talk a lot about sanctions, and they have sanctions, but at the same time they buy gas and oil from Russia, and they have trade agreements with countries, doing trade with Russia. So it's really hypocritical on a big scale. And it's the same, it goes the same for Sweden, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, still buying, Russian oil and gas. So this must be stopped, that's one thing. We can do things. We have been putting forward proposals in the European Parliament on Ukrainian refugees, to welcome them in our countries and what should be done. I work with Malin Björk, who is the Left Party representative. She has been very vocal about, for example, women from Ukraine seeking refuge in European countries, not getting the access, for example, to abortion or sexual and reproductive health care. So they need to go back to Ukraine, back to war, which is completely, insane. And we have been working we are very vocal about Putin's best friend in Europe, Viktor Orban. He's actually holding the presidency of the European Union this fall. It's crazy that we let these kind of, people govern Europe. So he shouldn't be allowed to do that, of course. Those are different things that we, as a party, think we can do and work more on.
All right, thank you. If you want, you can comment on that, and I will also pass you another question, which is that I would like you to develop on the point you made earlier, because that's a big issue, I think, within the Swedish left. So I think it's really interesting to maybe stay there just a little. Because the criticism against the Left Party, it's formulated like that. Like, why not push for negotiations instead? Like, we want peace, we are anti-militaristic, we don't want things to escalate, etc. So why don't you just sit down at the negotiation table? So that's an argument I've heard a lot in Sweden from leftists, and I would like you to be able to respond to that group of leftists.
Okay, just to complete on what Hanna said, and on your very first introduction when you said that there is a consciousness and maybe a feeling that this war could go on for years and years, but actually the reason why it could go on is because the Russian war machine is turning. And if we pretend that, the war is so long, so let's have a negotiation without putting into question why it is still possible for Russia to be so military active in Ukraine, I think it's a huge problem. About the fact why the discourse about negotiations, it's a very ill-informed discourse, actually, and the first argument why it is not something which is acceptable for Ukrainian is a very simple one for us, but maybe it is not easy to relate to people from the outside, is that we actually have families and friends living under the occupation. And under the occupation of a regime which is doing atrocities to civilians, which is openly claim that the Ukrainians have no right to exist as a separate society, and everybody who is not agree with that statement is a target for persecution, torture, and murder. I mean, we don't want our families and friends to live under these conditions and also to be under the constant threat of being occupied. But maybe it's not enough as an argument for somebody who is not related to Ukraine, who has not family there. So, of course, for me, and I will give a quote from my comrade Alexander. He wrote an interesting article where he explains a lot of the points that the solidarity with Ukraine mustn't just be a moral stance. It's actually a rational response for anybody who is concerned with our common future on the general level. Because, as Hanna explained, if a country, a great power, self-proclaimed great power, have a right to occupy another country without facing serious consequences, we open a Pandora box. Because why would any other wannabe imperialist power wouldn't do the same? And we are already seeing the consequences of this erosion of international law and international security. That means that the violence and the aggression is erupting anywhere in the world. It might take a form of an imperialist aggression, it might also take a form of civil war, and it might also take the form of an irredentist nation state that tries to suppress minorities or the territories they claim outside of their country. So we actually need to see the connection between this foundational moment for the complete erosion of the international security, which is the invasion of Ukraine, and what actually we see now in Gaza, in Armenia, in Azerbaijan with Nagorno-Karabakh conflict that somehow anybody pretended it didn't exist. That's very strange. So actually it have a very important implications for all of us. And I think we must take a political responsibility being here in the West. Why we have this political responsibility of being actually very principled in trying to not to erode even more the international security, but try to actually not to relativize it, but try to instead be clear that the violation of norms of the security order must be punishable in any case. And it must be punishable in the case of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, in the case of what is Israeli army doing in Gaza, and in every other case, because actually we have this situation where these values and norms that must be universal are relativized by the great powers themselves. These great powers have the right of veto right in the UN. So it creates a lot of frustration and the feeling that, about the Western hypocrisy in the global South, which is completely understandable. And this feeling of frustration is manipulated by people like Putin, who pursue their own interests. Why we have the responsibility to actually not to relativize the situation, not to normalize it, not to banalize it, because in a world where there is no international law, people who will suffer the most, who will die massively as a result of these wars, these will be the people living on the peripheries of a capitalist system. People in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in other peripheral states will be the first to actually feel the consequences of this multipolar world order that Putin is trying to build. We will be the last because we're in the center of the capitalist system. So this is our responsibility to actually apply all our forces and to search for a solution on a global level and not the local one, in order to stabilize the situation and to find a way out of this crisis. Because to pretend that you can solve the situation by providing a local solution, that means by offering Putin some part of Ukraine and expecting that it will solve the situation, it's a very egocentric, a very politically naive way of thinking. it's at the best case. At the worst case, people who are defending this kind of solutions, they are very cynical. They are very cynical because they accept a world order where there will be wars that doesn't concern them but concern other people. So I think we are entering very difficult and very dark times, and if we don't take this consciousness as quick as possible, I mean, it will not get better, let's say it like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and about the point of being principled, I mean, I completely agree, and that goes both ways. I mean, that means saying, Putin, get the fuck out of the Ukraine, but it also means saying to the US, like, okay, so first you are very principled about the world order in the Ukraine, and then you give military support to Israel in the middle of, you know, a genocide. We'll see what the lawyers say, but some, you know, they are just pushing people out of their homelands. So how will a global world order, I mean security order, peaceful one, be imaginable if no great power cares about it? So I really agree about the importance of leftists to be really principled, and in every case just say, you know, the imperial power has no rights to do that. So that was a small point. I would like to get back, but Hanna, do you have any comments on what Hanna just said?
I think Hanna explained what I wanted to say very, very well. But as you say about the US and about Russia, the same applies, the same goes for the EU and the Swedish government. I mean, you have one standard when it comes to, at least when they talk, when it comes to Russia and the invasion of Ukraine, and when it comes to Israel and Palestine, it's not the same. So this is also to show that actually what we're seeing is a complete erosion, I think, of international law that maybe it started on the 9/11, I don't know, but it could be discussed. But what we're seeing is something really, really dangerous, and that's why I think as well that the left must be very principled on the question of international law, not only because people care for the lives lost in Ukraine, but also because of our common future and international law, I think.
Yeah. I was wondering about why this has been a debate. I mean, it's different in different countries. I would like you to explain, like, in which countries has the left been helpful, and in which countries do you think that, they haven't been as prepared to be on the side of Ukraine in this war? And because it's like an old debate, and I mean, like in France, for example, Jean-Luc Mélenchon has been, you know, playing with both sides, so he's kind of an example, and his left-wing alliance has even broken up because of Gaza, but still, it started also with the Ukrainian war, where there was some tensions. Here in Sweden, some left-wing organizations have also had huge fights about these issues. And I think it might be because people are used to the Cold War system, where the US is the baddie if you're a left-winger. And since the 90s and onward, it was the case for a while, but now it's hard to say that's the case. So, first of all, do you think there's a different situation now, and what can we learn from it? And the other one is, which European countries do you think have made that intellectual journey and actually adapted to the new situation?
Okay. I will try to not to put some countries in competition with another. It's quite a tricky...
Only you please do.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You can rank them. 1, 2, 3. Eurovision Song Contest. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, in general, the tendency is common for all the, at least most of the left movements in the world. The movements which we are most familiar with, of course, these are the European ones, so we know better their perspectives and their divisions. And we had some personal contacts with a lot of leftist movement from the European countries. So yes, this division exists actually everywhere. As you said, one of the reasons for this division is some dogmatism and maybe a habit of actually being used to the situation where the world is stable. There is one imperialism, you don't need to make a lot of intellectual efforts to analyze the shift in reality, so you stick to this paradigm and you apply it to analyze the world. And one of the reasons why people are get so emotional actually trying to defend their way of analyzing the world, because also for many people it's an identity issue. They lived their whole life for many years struggling against the American imperialism, being a principled, what they seem to be a principled, leftist principled, I don't know, revolutionary principled, anti-imperialist. So it's very difficult emotionally and psychologically to change these patterns. But it's possible also. It's not excluded at all. So another reason why this paradigm still persists, it's for me a kind of an expression of methodological nationalism, actually trying to read the world through the prism of your own political agenda in your country. That means for a lot of left movements, it is practically impossible to imagine that they can align with their own government on issues like this, because their politics is based on their principled opposition to everything that their government does. So this is also a question of, how do you place yourself in the political spectrum of your country, on the political scene. So I think many people are also blinded by this very narrow political agenda and national political agenda. This is something that I have seen a lot being in the United States. Of course, this is also another continent, they're just far away from the things going on in Ukraine. But I think they are very attached to the idea that they cannot accept something that their government is pushing for. Yes, these are actually the reasons I see for this very difficult evolution. But still there is an evolution in the left, in the European left, and it is not to be this is the first time I'm actually in the Nordic countries. Before I was to Norway, but I was also in Norway this summer meeting some young left activists. And what I have seen is that among the young activists, but not also the activists of many ages in the Scandinavian countries, there is a lot more of understanding of the issue. I think my interpretation, you may correct me, somehow it is related to your historical experience of actually valuing democratic rights and understanding that without having democratic rights, freedom of speech, freedom of association, it's very difficult to build any progressive social policies and to struggle for the social rights of the workers. It is maybe has also something to do with the fact that the left in your countries had actually an experience of participating in the government and being responsible towards the statements they make, being responsible for the community they represent. And in the countries where the left is marginalized and doesn't have any experience of institutional politics, the question of political responsibility can be tricky, because people are concerned with their image of radicals more than with actually solving the problems their societies are confronted with. But this is my narrow explanation.
I have a really sad counter-explanation, which is that we lost the Battle of Poltava. No, by which I mean that Russia is seen as maybe the one arch enemy in Sweden. I mean, somehow back in our collective consciousness. I mean, we are right to support the Ukraine. I just think that in Sweden it's in the left maybe people are hesitant, but in Sweden in general, I think that people have an easy time seeing Russia as an opponent, as an enemy. So I think that that also plays into all this, which is a maybe sadder explanation. I love the way you praised the Nordic nations, and maybe you are right as well, but that was just another thought. Hanna, would you like to come in and say, we didn't get the list, by the way.
Please give us one.
Can't you say name one baddie?
I'm sorry. No.
All right.
It's provocation. I will not react.
Mediterranean countries, maybe, or something like that.
But of course, there is a difference between,
I'm half
as
Greek,
you
so I can say that.
said, the countries that feel themselves like in the direct danger of the Russian imperialism tend to be a little bit more realistic.
Yes, exactly. And in Italy, for example, I read that people even stopped. They were leftists stopping the trains, sending armaments to. So that's an example, I guess. It was a communist party, I think. Anyway, Hanna, would you like to comment, or do you want us to move on? How do you feel? Let's move on. All right. We were kind of getting into the issue of the global international order, and it would be nice to hear from you, Hanna. But maybe we'll take that a bit later on, because I want to speak a little about Ukraine. And I think the people here don't really know the internal politics of the country. And first of all, what do you think of Zelensky?
Me?
Yes.
I don't think we must actually be so concerned with the personality of Zelensky. His role in the Ukrainian politics, well, it might change, of course, with time, but I don't think this is the guy who has all the power in the country, and we must actually understand his psychology, etc. If we compare it to Putin, clearly Putin has more influence on the question like war and peace than Zelensky has, because he's more dependent on the opinion of the actual Ukrainians. But yes, the very important thing that we must say, well, first thing, in order to be clear, is that Zelensky, he was a president elected democratically, was a huge percentage. No other president in Ukraine has so much, how to say,
big majority, or
a big majority of voters, and actually trying to, by his, let's admit, the populist discourse, to unite different parts of the country, to show that East and West are not divided, and these kind of things. Though somehow we were, of course, as the leftists, we were very skeptical about this guy, because he had no economic program whatsoever. His discourse were populist, but also it gave us a little bit of indication that even after 5 years of war in the Donbass, the Ukrainian society is not going into a direction of radical ethno-nationalism, voting for a guy who is Jewish, who is openly spoken Russian for his whole life. And so this kind of thing that also gave us a little bit of indication, so maybe things are not so bad as some tend to present them in the Western Europe. And also Zelensky showed itself, at least for me, he surprised me in a good way at the beginning of the war. Actually, made the choice to stay in the country and to defend the country and to become a symbol of the resistance. Of course, the time goes on, and as I said, the class contradictions and internal contradiction in Ukraine didn't disappear with the Russian invasion, and what we actually see is an absurd situation where the circle around Zelensky, people who are supposed to provide some solutions to actually allow Ukraine to win this war, when it concerns economy, they pretend they can win the war without adapting the economy to the needs of resistance. They pretend that for the first time in history, a country can win a war with a neoliberal economy. It never happened. It makes no sense. For them, it's like never changed. Nothing changed, and market will solve everything. So yes, this is provoking an absurd, absolutely crazy situation of massive privatization of assets in the times of war, of the dismantlement of labor law in the context of the martial law, where strikes are prohibited and massive demonstrations are prohibited, so it gives them more tools to actually attack what is remaining of the social rights in Ukraine. And it also can give you an idea about the fact that neoliberals and the authorities in Ukraine are actually more neoliberal and more radical in their measures than any European norms that the European Union can... that the European Union can impose on us. So we have a feeling that if they are not limited, if these guys are not pushed, are not pressured from the outset because they care about international opinion, they care about European countries, they can go very far. Why? It's also because the working class in Ukraine, well, it is affected by the war, and it is affected in a very concrete way. The trade unions, who are also supposed to defend the workers' rights, of course they try to do it, but they are concerned with the physical survival of their members. A lot of their members are on the front line. A lot of their members have lost the house, have lost the income. So they are trying to solve these questions, and they don't have all the tools to actually protest against the measures that are being imposed on the Ukrainian working people. And I think most of the people, they find it extremely unfair that they are on the front line trying to actually defend with their lives and bodies the sovereignty of this country. And the sovereignty in a political sense, but also in an economic sense, like a right to decide. You as a people, like Ukrainians as a people, they think they also fight for have the possibility of decide what is going on inside of their country, the politics that are being chosen. So, and by imposing these neoliberal reforms, Zelensky and his government are undermining the confidence, undermining the social cohesion of the country, and undermining a lot of trust the people had in them. So they are actually undermining the victory with their own hands because I think they are sincere and they actually believe that this kind of neoliberal reforms will work. They have these dogmas in their heads and they cannot get rid of. So I think there is a very important role of the international left and of the European left to actually make pressure on the Ukrainian government. And I think a good way to react to this is to be unconditional when it concerns the the military help to Ukraine, because Ukraine needs weapons to defend itself and to defend its citizens, but to be more pragmatic and more conditional when it goes to the financial help to the Ukrainian government, to be sure that Ukraine is effective in fighting corruption, that the Ukrainian government stops actually these antisocial policies. So to be really more radical in this sense, because if there is a neoliberal paradise in Ukraine that dismantle this country from the inside, well, you will have a lot of millions of people that will become the refugees. This is the first thing. And also, if there is neoliberalism wins in some distant countries, if it has implications on other countries too, because it normalizes this kind of politics.
All right. I would also just shortly, I mean, is there an opposition doing something? I mean, that's a plea to the international left on how to act. But is there pressure from below somehow? I mean, my prejudice about Eastern Europe, unfortunately, is that the left is very weak. And how does the left look in Ukraine? And are you pushing these points inside of the country?
Both of these things are true, and one doesn't exclude the other. When we are analyzing the state of the left in Ukraine and the post-social space, we need to understand what is our point of reference. If our point of reference is a country, a European country, that had a certain continuity in the social struggles and battles, and this continuity was not disrupted by a Soviet state, if we compare, so you have clearly the left which is more developed in these countries than in post-Soviet ones. My personal opinion and my analysis is that one of the reasons of this weakness is that socialist ideology was completely discredited by the actual politics of the Soviet period. When these ideas were used for the extreme forms of oppression, political oppression and social oppression. So we have a situation where for almost 3 decades, people in the post-Soviet space had no actual possibilities to organize themselves from below. So this tradition of the social struggle was interrupted. And somehow Ukrainian left and the trade unions need to start from scratch. We need to start with a very automized society paradoxically maybe for some of you, but Soviet societies was one of the most atomized societies, and these things get even worse in the 90s when all the wealth, state wealth, was looted by oligarchs, and people lost any hope that actually politics depend on them. So we have a different situation, very difficult one, but of course we have social forces that try to find a solution for that, and we just need to start from very basic things, to actually explain to people why these kind of policies are harmful for them, to make them learn this relation between the cause and the effect, and also to actually being with them in their social struggles. People are organizing themselves from below. They want to do it. They lack strategy. They lack politicization. They lack vision, and they lack just practice. So we try to provide people who can help and these people to actually organize from below and maintain the structures people are trying to create in a very spontaneous way, because spontaneously there is a lot of self-organization. But what is lacking is the actual structure and institutional possibilities to continue this struggle.
All right. I want to slowly move into allowing the audience in. I'm going to ask you, Hanna, the last question. I have some more if you guys are going to be silent, but I don't think you are. So first of all, do you have a comment on what you've just heard? And if you want to develop on the question of the international order and the consequences for that, maybe you can do that now. So that was my last question for you, Hanna.
Yes. About what you said, Hanna, I think that's why, as well, if we can find these moments of exchange between trade unions in different countries or between left parties to learn from each other, I think the left parties, for example, the left party in Sweden needs to learn a lot from you and with the history in Ukraine and what's going on right now. And maybe we can as well try to develop a cooperation. I think that would be great. About the oligarchy, the growing oligarchy in Russia, but as well in Ukraine. I was actually living in Russia in 1993 when this was quite, you could go into the streets and it was crazy. You could see the oligarchy society growing, and what has developed from that is horrific. My question is, and what I'm afraid of is that yes, we see now huge privatizations in Ukraine, for example, and if you want, by the way, a bad example to show to the Ukrainian people, you can point at Sweden, actually, in the Swedish school system and say, this is not something we should copy. But what about when the war, now we're in the war and what's happening now, but when the war has ended, when Ukraine is free, what's the situation then? Because then we need to think about how can we help rebuilding Ukraine without making huge privatizations. I guess the European Union will see this as a lovely way of, going into a new country and making huge profits. How can we as a left help this not happening in the end? To stop, we're talking about and putting forward proposals for having to write off national debts, for example. That could be one way, but we must also have a strong strategy when it comes to the day the war has ended, and I think we should develop on that together.
If I could add something about it, I totally agree, and actually we need already to think about these questions, because the plans for reconstruction of Ukraine are already being discussed on the platforms with neoliberals from Ukraine meeting neoliberals from other countries and having fun and drinking wine, and also somehow planning how to loot the country in the most effective way for them. So it's already happening, and we are observing. But of course, inside the Ukrainian left, we also try to actually unite our intellectual forces and our connections with the civil society in order to provide some alternative vision for the future. And what is the most scandalous in all of these plans for the reconstruction? That no civil society and no voice of the Ukrainian workers is actually included in these discussions. Who are defending Ukraine with their bodies? These are the Ukrainian workers, like ordinary people, and you have a lot of them in the trade unions. These trade unions, they are not included in this process of how the Ukraine is being to reconstruct, but also in the protest, even the discussions and even the reform of the labor law, they are not even included in this process. So this is something. As I said, maybe one of the ways we could help here is to actually amplify the voices of the Ukrainian society, which is kind of being ignored in this whole story. And these people, they have things to say, and they need to be included already now in actually planning the future of Ukraine. Because even in the harsh conditions of war, people are organizing. And they are already building a society of the Ukraine of the future. And there's a lot of competing projects inside of Ukraine. What will be the Ukraine of the future? A neoliberal one, a right-wing extremist one, of course. Also the left project. All of them exist at the same time. And which project will actually be put into practice, it also depends on what kind of political and social forces inside Ukraine we are in solidarity with being outside of Ukraine.
All right, let's give them a round of applause. The only thing that can stop a room full of neoliberals drinking wine is a room full of socialists drinking wine. All right?
Wine is good.
That was not the problem. Okay, thank you. Anyway, I've seen one hand with the gentleman in the back. I know it's Peter. You're welcome to. Do you want to have a microphone to amplify your voice? Or?
No, I'll be making Leonidas happy by asking the questions. Only asking the questions. I've got two of them. One is, do you have some concrete examples? Because this is not very much discussed in Sweden. If you can give us just some examples of these anti-social policies that you mentioned, is my first question. And then the other one is, what would be your kind of economic program that you think is needed in order to win the war?
So what are some of the antisocial questions that you mentioned, and what is needed to win the war?
Okay, I will try to. I must admit, I'm not the best person in my movement to actually be the expert on these questions, and we have really trade unions, people who are into the actual fight every day. So one of the latest examples is this reform of labor law that actually makes it even easier for employers to fire people without facing any consequences. It makes it easier to make the working hours even longer, like till the infinite. There is no limit. For exploitation. And you have these propositions. Another example is actually the discourse of the neoliberal politicians in Ukraine, Ukraine is faced with a situation where there is a lack of working force on the market. People are in the army, and 10 million, practically 10 million people have moved out of Ukraine, so you have a lack of working force. How do you attract people? Well, the solution that is proposed by some politicians in Ukraine is to say, hey, countries of Europe, don't pay any money to Ukrainian refugees, we want them back home. And they're like openly saying that. So this is this level of cynicism, and so these are the few examples, and you have also things going on in the educational reform and, as I said, the massive privatization of some key economic assets of Ukraine. And about the actual alternative problem, I don't know how to summarize it without prolonging this discussion till the infinite. But yes, we have some economicists which are progressive, and with that we have also in our movement or among our contacts, friends and sympathizers, they are actually trying to develop this another vision of the Ukrainian economy or cooperating with the trade unions. One of the things, the key things we fight for is the cancellation of the foreign debt. This is like the basis, and if it's not cancelled, I don't know how Ukraine will survive. Another thing is to actually adapt the Ukrainian economy to the needs of war. It is still something which is not understood by most of the European politicians, and yeah, maybe where we will have a discussion, I would like also Alexander maybe to give a few examples, maybe he has something in his mind.
All right. Do you mean right now?
No, when he wants, I don't want to
Okay. Maybe a question over there? Yes. Maybe you want the microphone?
No, I don't think I need it.
All right.
I think that, I mean, for the moment, it's necessary that much of the help to Ukraine today consists of weapons, military personnel, and military material, and so on. But when, in the long run, and maybe in a situation of also peace growing or something, what we would call it, there would be lots of other types of help needed. And also solidarity with different sorts of groups in Ukraine, I imagine, people in different trades and whatnot. So is there anything that could be done already today that doesn't concern weapons and military equipment? If people want to be solidaric but don't want to engage in the weapons trade, is there something that could be done on a civil level to support Ukraine?
I'm sorry. Yes. Are there any other measures if you don't want support with weapons, like on the civil level, if you want to help?
It's a very good question, and I think I can give a few examples, considering the fact that I'm active in the solidarity with Ukraine in Switzerland, especially. And as you know, Swiss pretends to be a neutral country. For me, it's a wrong term, because I think it's not a neutrality; it's economic cynicism of Switzerland, which is behind this word. But anyway, I will not go into details. But yes, we have a prohibition, which is the official prohibition for any association to actually help the Ukrainian military in any way. Even by providing medicines, we send medicines in Ukraine, and we had problems because of it. So this is very restrictive. So what to do for people who want to be in solidarity in this situation? One of the things you can do is to actually pressure on your government on the things like sanctions, cooperation with Russia. There is still a lot of work to do. If you want something which is more connected with Ukrainians themselves, to actually have a connection with the Ukrainian society, to know that your efforts, your money, your time is going to help directly these people affected by the war, well, you have, and if you are into the perspective also of social emancipation and struggle for equality, in Ukraine there is already a certain number of collectives that are into this perspective. For example, the feminist organizations, which are already doing the work of helping Ukrainian vulnerable women who are vulnerable because of the war. There is also anarchists and other anti-authoritarian movements that, of course, help military, but also a huge part of their work is to actually go into these cities destroyed by the war and trying to recreate some social life and connection there. One example that particularly touched me, because I was not aware of that. So you have thousands of villages destroyed by the war. The social tissue is destroyed. What happens? There are actually children still living in these villages. What happens is that there is a space for radical fundamentalist religious organizations. Most of them are from the United States, but not all of them, who go into these places where the social tissue is destroyed and who try to provide this tissue, but by vehiculating homophobic, anti-feminist messages, to actually trying to socialize the children of Ukraine into this very strange religious discourse. And there are also people who are trying to provide some alternative to go into these destroyed villages and to try to work with children, to also say to them that they are not to be desperate, actually, to provide them with the activities. And these are very small things, not maybe directly related to the resistance against the Russian occupation, but still very, very important. Yes, you have a lot of humanitarian organization, and even if they are not leftist, their work is very, very important. The Ukrainian society is so affected by the war, is so affected by the massive destruction. Ukraine is one of the most mined countries in the world. To take more than 100 years to actually demine this, so this is a huge issue. I can provide a lot of, examples, and even after that, we can give examples of organizations and contacts. Yeah.
Maybe you can provide them to us, and we can post them in the event, for example.
Of course.
And we should probably add
totally
Social Niruch into the list, I guess,
yes.
which is your organization. We've actually run an ad in Flamman several times for supporting your cause. So
thank you. Yes, Social Ruch also doing humanitarian activities, and we are also helping the military with comrades who are on the front line. We provide them their equipment that will actually save their lives, like medical equipment, etc.
Right. Do we have another question? Otherwise, I actually have one, which is, and this is a really spicy one, actually. How does the Ukrainian left and the Ukrainian people view the issue of NATO?
Spicy. I don't know if my answer will be spicy. I don't know. I don't have any statistics just here to know exactly what is the opinion. Is there been any recent surveys? I don't know.
So within the left, I guess then. How is the talk on these issues in the left?
Yes. So maybe a way to answer this question is to say that why the Ukrainian society is actually pushed, especially after the invasion by Russia, to want to join NATO. One of the main reasons is not because they are fascinated by the NATO or something, but because we actually had an agreement with major world powers like Russia, UK and US, who signed an agreement. We gave all our nuclear weapons, and we were supposed to receive guarantees of our territorial integrity. So Russia violated this agreement in 2014, and nothing really happened. And then it violated it for the second time, and for many Ukrainians, but also for many other countries who are an indirect threat of the Russian imperialists. That means that, unfortunately, in this situation, these kind of agreements mean nothing, and we are pushed into a situation where countries actually need to choose to be members of military alliances in order to be at least a little bit more sure that they could be protected. And even the military alliance such as NATO doesn't have now a very good people do not really trust anymore in this institution, and not really sure what will happen if one of the NATO countries is actually invaded. Will it work or not? We see also the erosion of this consensus. So I think Ukrainian people are put into a situation where they do not have much choice than to join a military alliance. For us, as for the leftists, of course, it's a dramatic situation, and of course, in our ideal world, military alliances doesn't exist, will have no place to exist. But we're also in a situation where no alternative version, no alternative vision of what are the actual working guarantees for the security of their country. No solution is provided, so we don't know if there was a choice between NATO and something other. There could be a discussion, but for now we don't really see the alternative.
Thank you so much. I would like to hear you respond to that. I actually made some leftists angry when I posed this question when the war broke out. And I said, yes, I'm also against NATO, but what is the other option for the countries affected in these areas, people neighboring Russia? What should we give them instead? I said that there should be an European alternative. Maybe that is what NATO will become under Trump. He will maybe leave. So everything will solve itself.
That's quite possible.
But anyway, that was my proposition. That was controversial in some leftist circles. But still, I mean, this is a real issue for people in the Ukraine and in the governing countries of Russia. So how does the leftist party respond to that?
Well, I think it's a real issue for people in Ukraine, and I do think it's a different situation in Sweden, actually, and that you have to have respect for the people's choice in different countries. And when it comes to Sweden, we do actually have alternatives. I'm so shocked, I think a lot of people are, that there were actually no discussion at all, I felt, that of Sweden joining NATO. Of course, we need a strong military and military cooperation with different countries. I completely agree, but we don't need this under the NATO umbrella and with the nuclear power that it concerns.
I mean, that's from the Swedish perspective.
Yes, this is
but
from the
I'm
Swedish
thinking about
perspective.
A more international perspective, and especially people neighboring Russia.
Yeah.
What should we tell them?
No, I'm not the one to give the people of Ukraine, advice on who to join and so on. That the people of Ukraine should decide, as well as the people of Sweden should decide on our future. I don't think we did that with the NATO, actually. And look, you mentioned Trump. Look at what's happening now. So we will probably join NATO in a couple of weeks or months or years, we don't know, when Hungary when they decide. And then Trump says, well, no, we're not interested in NATO anymore, you take care of yourselves. So then we will look at alternatives, probably, and I think we will have a discussion in the European elections about an alternative to NATO. So this won't stop with NATO. And we are living in times when, like all the solution to all the world's problems is through weapons. I don't agree on this. I think that when it comes to Ukraine, we should keep on providing aid and weapons as long as the Ukrainian people needs it. But it's not the solution to all world's problems to kind of boost military spending and to join a nuclear power umbrella. I don't think so.
All right, I think we should maybe end on that note. We've been talking for a while now. Oh, you have to. Okay, so 2 short questions and 2 short answers, and then we're done for tonight. Please.
Yeah, no. I'm an old teacher, so I have a voice. But my English is very rusty. It's long since I met, for example, Kagalitsky in Stockholm. But I'm trying to. This about NATO. I'm from Finland. Finland was one of the most anti-NATO countries. It was 80% anti-NATO. Then came the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it was a very, very simple thing to decide that we want to join the NATO. And it's a very big difference between Sweden and Finland in this. Finland, it's a security question. It's not an ideological question in the same way as it is in Sweden. And I'm so glad when I listened to you from V, because 1st of May is a typical big leftist thing in Stockholm, and if you went to see the demonstration last year, there was not one, yes there was one, some of them had made it, with Russia out of Ukraine. Otherwise if you passed this demonstration, you would have believed that NATO had invaded Ukraine. It was just about NATO. And I was very nice, it was nice to listen to you, and Jonas Sjöstedt has been a very good speaker on many of these meetings we have had. But otherwise, I have to say, do you feel that you have your party behind you when you support Ukraine today?
All right. So first,
a year ago, you didn't have it. It was a very good thing to try to find. They have done something wrong. This has happened in Ukraine.
So there's been a debate with the party for a year, and do you feel that you have the support? We're going to take the other question, a brief one as well, I hope. And then we'll get, yes, exactly.
Pointing at me, okay.
Yes.
I'm Hanna Gedin, you're a candidate for the European Parliament, and I will vote for you and Jonas. But the group you're in, of other European leftist parties, how do they view Ukraine?
You're insinuating something.
I'm asking. I want to know. I don't know.
Okay.
Yes, it's nice to end with the critical questions. No, but I'm happy. I knew they were coming. Do I have my party with me in what I'm saying on Ukraine? Yes, I do. I completely feel that from the Swedish Left Party perspective, there's no question about supporting Ukraine and Ukraine people and getting Russian troops out of Ukraine. In the beginning, just when the invasion became a fact, I do agree that it was a bit hesitant. I think it's because of history, and you were talking about, peace, the peace movement, meeting the actual things that happened in Ukraine. It was shocking. And for 2 days, the party board hesitated on whether to send weapons or whether to send money the same amount as weapons. And the party board, and I was a member of the party board, took the wrong decision. It was a difficult decision. But when we realized that, we changed our minds. We saw that what the people of Ukraine are actually demanding and counting on us for is actually weapons. And even though we're not used to this, this is the demands of the Ukraine people, and we must listen to this. So we changed. And sometimes I think that politics needs to change sometimes, and that you must admit when you're doing something wrong. I think it's a good thing.
May I add something also?
Yes.
I mean, the left party wants to be a grassroots party, a democratic party where you decide things together and then the leadership follow that command. And it's more difficult in such a party to maybe be quick in these issues, but you have to be quick. So that was maybe also in other countries more, where it's supposed to be the top, just deciding everything, then that wouldn't have been an issue. You can just do whatever is needed every day. So
I think you're correct. And as well, I think we're living in times not only when international law is completely eroded, but also quick decisions is à la mode. It's very popular. Look at the pandemic, for example, really huge political implications of quick decisions like this. We're not used to it. And then the war, the Russian aggression of Ukraine, very quick decisions. The question about NATO, no discussion whatsoever from my perspective. So that's also an issue. So we need to adapt to this.
Thank you so much for today. Give them a big round of applause.